So let's talk about what we should be doing in our bees. And before we jump into that, a few quick housekeeping things. If you have any questions, you can always put them in the Q&A box, and James and Sherry will answer those questions for you. So just pop them in that Q&A box and we'll get those answered. And I did change a setting so that you can now see the questions as they're being asked, and you can see answers, and you can even answer some of the questions if you can beat James and Sherry. So check out that new setting. A couple really quick things to note before we jump in and get started is we do still have nooks and single story hives and queens available. So we are still raising additional nooks and singles, and they're still available for sale. And our May magazine is out, and it came out a couple of days ago. Sherry, I don't know if you want to jump on and talk about it briefly, but you can always jump onto our website and see that for free at any time, and see all the archives for free on our website.
I want to say that if you aren't getting it in your inbox, you need to do it, because this is really getting popular. I don't know, what are we, over 7,000 readers?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, just a couple of people. It's really a good magazine. The one we're doing working for June is all about honey extraction. So everybody focus on this. It's a tool that's going to help. So that's all I got to say.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, jump on there and you can sign up to get this in your inbox, or you can go to our website and see under free magazine. It's one of the main headings, and you can check that out anytime. A couple other quick things. I mentioned these last month, but I want to make sure that you're familiar with them. These are 2 free educational resources we hand out if you visit one of our stores. So one's a getting started guide, and one's our monthly tips for what you need to be doing in your bees each month. Kind of like these webinars, but in written form. Last thing, and I talked about this last month, so I won't spend a whole lot of extra time on it, but we're still super excited about these new frames that we're carrying. And they're selling incredibly well. The bees draw out the comb so much faster. They've got 30% more wax per frame, 10% more cells per frame, made with wood glue, made in the US. It's just a pretty fantastic frame. So if you're in one of our stores, check that out, or you can always do free shipping on our website. Okay, so last month, month before last, we actually started doing a segment at the beginning of the webinar where we take a look at what's going on out in the bee yard. And so this time it was really popular last time. Most folks really loved it. It's about 15-20 minutes long today. And so we're gonna kind of jump out into the bee yard and watch that video. And just as a side note, all the videos that we show throughout this webinar are also on our YouTube channel. So I know some folks' internet connection can be a little skippy sometimes, especially over Zoom. And so if you ever want to go back and watch any of those videos, much better quality, you can always do that on our YouTube page. So without further ado, let me jump in here and pull up this video here. So hold tight just a second, and we will make that happen. There we go. Sorry. Okay, now I've got it. All right, guys. Here we go with the video. Hey guys, welcome to the bee yard. It's a gorgeous day today. I mean, this week has just been phenomenal weather. We got some awesome rain last week, and it's great to be in the bee yard with this gorgeous weather and the honey flow really starting. One of the big things we're going to focus on out in the bee yard today is supering, because it's that time of year. It's time to start checking and seeing if hives are ready for supers, getting supers onto hives, and then checking to see if we need to add additional supers. And so that's a big thing that we're going to look at today. I always have to make note, I'm just wearing my nitrile gloves today because I'm going to try to find and mark a queen in just a minute. But bees do sting through these occasionally, but it's rare. The other thing I recently discovered, that I'm probably the last one to realize this, but one of the things I love about these nitrile gloves, If you're just doing something quick and easy out in the bee yard, they're great to throw on and keep your hands somewhat protected from stings. But I've also started taking notes on them. So I'll actually get a Sharpie and I'll write notes about, oh, hey, this hive needed this hive needed this, or numbers, etc. So it's kind of a cool notepad. Okay, so this hive, let's take a look at it and see if it's ready for a super. Now, it was a new single-story hive, and we added a second box to it about a week or two ago. We added a second brood box, and we've been feeding it to get them to grow into that second brood box. So the first brood box was about 80% full of drawn comb, and then we added our second brood box. Now, we were fortunate, we had some previously drawn comb and then some foundation. My goal is when this second brood box I've just added 2 weeks ago, when it's 80% full of drawn honeycomb, then I'm ready to add my first super. So let's take a look and see what they're doing. So I'm looking at the number 3 frame here, and you can see they're just starting to draw out a little bit of wax. Not much, but just a little. You can see a little bit of white on that black foundation that they're just starting to draw out. So let's go another frame in. So this one, they're doing a little better. They're drawing a little bit more wax. On this other side, you can see that they've drawn out quite a bit more wax. So they're certainly working, but they're not, they're not quite ready for a honey super yet. Usually once they start drawing out the foundation on the 7th and 8th frame, that's when I'm ready to add another box. So these bees are doing well. They're drawing out comb. You can see here, I mean, again, it's pretty beautiful. You know, they're drawing out that beautiful white beeswax. The queen even has eggs all in here. I don't know if you can see it in the video or not. I'll get a little closer and perhaps you can. But you can actually, if the sunlight hits just right, then you can see eggs down in the bottom of those cells. So she's doing great. She's moving up like she's supposed to into the second brood box. For a hive like this, they've got maybe the middle 5 frames drawn out with honeycomb. I'm going to keep feeding them, and I'm going to say in about another week to 10 days, they're probably going to be ready for a honey super. But generally speaking, once they're drawing out the 7th and 8th frame in that second box, that's when you're ready to add a honey super. And so when we're ready to add a honey super, let's pretend this hive has that 7th and 8th frame already being drawn out. It's really simple. We're just going to get our box of, now this is a super of foundation, so the comb isn't drawn yet, and we're just going to place it directly on top of that second brood box. Now, like I said, this is just foundation, so it's not drawn honeycomb. And so we're going to put it on, and I'm going to keep feeding, and I'm going to come back about a week later, and once they've got about a fist-sized piece of honeycomb drawn out on these center frames, which usually takes about a week if you're still feeding, then I'm going to come back in a week, and I'm going to put my queen excluder between that top brood box and my honey super. Now this is a really critical step, because if you put that queen excluder on before they start drawing out foundation up in this box, the bees are not going to travel through that queen excluder to start drawing out foundation. They just refuse to do it. So they've got to get started drawing out foundation, and then you can add your queen excluder about a week later. And then it's simple from there. Once this box is 80% drawn out with honeycomb, you're ready to add your second honey super. This hive is a good example of a hive that needs food. A lot of people have questions about feeding in the spring. How much do I feed? For how long? Why do I feed at all? Really common issue that I see with brand new beekeepers is them not feeding enough. And they may feel like, hey, my hive isn't growing as quickly as it seems like it should. What's going on? And you've got to keep in mind that bees, especially when they're in a growth phase, they need a lot of food. in order to draw out honeycomb and to grow as quickly as possible. So this hive right here was actually a package that we installed, actually on video, probably a month ago. A month. Let's see, what is today? Today is May 6th. So yeah, it was about a month ago that we installed this package. And we fed, for point of reference, we fed this package 2 gallons of syrup in the past month, which isn't nearly enough. You can see they've got bees on about the middle 4 frames, and these outside frames, you know, they really haven't started drawing out foundation at all. And this would apply to a newly installed nook or even a single story hive. So here you can see that they have drawn out, this is the 4th frame on one side. They've drawn it out. They've got a little bit of pollen in there, but not a lot of nectar or stored syrup. You know, this time of year, I want to see multiple frames of stored syrup or honey in my hive. You know, I like in the brood boxes, I like to see, you know, this time of year, probably 3 to 4 frames of stored honey or syrup in each brood box. That's kind of my goal, and the rest should be brood. So here, you know, one of the big things I watch for is, you know, do I have a band of honey around my brood? So here, you know, I've got good cap brood, and I've got a little bit of honey and nectar around the edges, but not much. If you're looking at your frames in your hive and you've got brood in the middle and there is no, or virtually no, stored honey around the edge on most of the frames, I get pretty concerned. I mean, that's concerning to me when I'm not seeing, you know, a band of honey around the edges of those frames, and then some excess frames of honey as well. Now, once the honey flow really kicks into full gear, you shouldn't have to feed your bees. They're going to grow fine on natural nectar. But while they're in that early growth phase, they often need help, and they need you to do some feeding to really help them to grow as quickly as they need to grow. Now, what's kind of cool about this hive is we haven't fed it in a couple of weeks, and I came and checked it last week and it was on the verge of starvation. There was virtually no stored nectar. But this week, they've actually got pretty good bands of nectar now around the brood, and they've got a couple extra frames of honey on the outside. So you can kind of see that nectar all around the edges here. Not a lot, but there's a little bit. And so the honey flow is really starting. You know, they're really starting to bring in some honey, but it would still boost them a lot and help them if we did some feeding. I'm going to mark this queen. I found the queen here, and I'm gonna, just because, hey, we're out here, I'm gonna show you guys how to mark a queen really quickly. So first you need your marking pin. This year happens to be white, and you've got to find your queen. So finding your queen is the real battle. And so I'm gonna try to get you a closer shot of her here, but she's right here. And so here's our queen. And so one of the important things when you're marking a queen is you want to pick her up by her thorax. So you don't want to hold her by her abdomen. Her abdomen is too soft. Now, the best advice I can give you is practice with drones. So pick up and mark 100 drones and then you're ready to mark a queen, because if you kind of squish a drone, no big deal. Now, you do need to either be wearing nitrile gloves or bare gloves. You don't want to be wearing, you know, bare hands. You don't want to be wearing leather gloves because they're too awkward, and you'll squish that queen as you try to pick her up. So I recommend nitrile gloves if you're nude, because it'll make you a little more comfortable about not getting stung. So put on your gloves, practice on a bunch of drones. You're gonna pick them up by the thorax with these 2 fingers, pick them up by the thorax, put a dot on that drone. So for marking the queen, I'm gonna pick her up right off the comb by the thorax. Now sometimes I have to kind of hold her a little bit and adjust a bit to get her held properly. And it's fine, she's pretty tough, just be very gentle. But you can see I'm holding her by her thorax. And so, you know, her thorax is where I'm putting the pressure to hold her very, very gently, which means her thorax is exposed so I can put a mark on it. So I've got her thorax exposed, I've got my marking pin, and now I'm just gonna put a little dot. And there goes my camera. That's an opportune time. Sorry about that, guys. So I'm holding my queen right here by her thorax, and then I'm putting a little dot on her, right? Gently, you know, just putting a little mark. And then I like to hold her for just a couple of minutes. I'm sorry, not a couple minutes. Maybe 10 seconds. Let that mark dry just a little bit, because otherwise the bees will bite it off, and then release her back onto the frame. And you know, some marks will stay for a long time and others won't. You know, some bees, after a few months, they'll kind of chew that mark off the queen. Other bees, you know, they'll leave it on indefinitely. But there you go. So this hive, you know, like I said, we were talking about feeding, and we got sidetracked, which is easy to do when we're playing in the bee yard. But you can see they had about 2 frames of brood, and then they've got an outside frame. This outside frame is actually pretty much all nectar, which is awesome. So they've got, you know, a band of honey around 2 frames of brood, and then they've got 2 partial frames of honey or stored nectar. In general, I'd like to see a package further advanced than this one, or a nook. So if we had fed probably 4 gallons over the last month, I think you'd see this hive almost twice this size, because they can only grow if they have sufficient food. And so whether you newly installed a nook or a package or made a split, you know, make sure you're feeding them up to 1 gallon per week if they'll drink it, so that they can draw out new comb, raise baby bees, and grow as quickly as we want them to, so we can make a honey crop. If you don't care about making a honey crop, you don't have to be quite as aggressive on feeding. But if you want to make a honey crop, and this is especially if this is your first year in beekeeping or you've made splits, you got to feed to really help them grow. And my goal is to have their 2 brood boxes full of brood honey or stored syrup, so that when I put my honey super on, all that nectar that they bring in goes right into my honey supers, instead of having to fill up brood boxes with that precious nectar. So that's if you really want to optimize honey. You know, if honey isn't a huge goal of yours, then you can kind of just let them work through drawing out that foundation on more of a natural flow, but it'll certainly be slower. So this hive is kind of interesting because it was actually, it's 2 deep brood boxes, so it was a really good strong hive, and then it swarmed. And so obviously when the hive swarms, it really reduces the strength of the hive. And so I wanted to just look at it quickly with you guys and give you some observations. Now, one thing right off the bat, it's actually, it swarmed about 3 weeks ago. And so if you look, it's actually quite full of bees. They've replenished themselves quickly. My favorite thing to do as I'm looking at hives when I'm trying to judge the population of the hive is to look at the top box and the bee population in it before I smoke the hive. And I get you can get a really good feel for how many bees there are in a hive as you look kind of down between the frames before you smoke it. And I want to try to show you guys here. If you look down between these frames, you can see they're actually full of bees. I mean, down between each one of these frames, you can see it's just full of bees. We've even got bees over here by this division board feeder. And so, you know, this is a hive that honestly, without even going any further, I'm gonna say is about ready for a super, even, you know, assuming they've got a queen with, you know, that's laying eggs, that's you know, assuming they raised a new queen after they swarmed, just judging on the bee population, it's about ready for another box. So let's confirm that they did raise them new queen for themselves, and if they did, then based on this bee population, this one's ready for a honey super. So I'm going to pull up some of these frames and see what we've got going on. So I've got a lot of fresh nectar, which is fantastic to see. And I'm seeing some clues that they either have a queen or may have one soon. One of the biggest things I look for, and I'll adjust this so you can see it, but you can see there's fresh nectar all around the edge of this frame. Hopefully you can kind of see it shimmering in there. But in the center of this frame, they don't have anything stored. They're wide open patches of cells, that whole center area. Now there's no eggs in there, but they've got it wide open as if they're getting ready for a queen to lay. And you'll often see that in a hive when they're raising a new queen. You know, a week or so before that queen starts to lay, they'll start clearing patches in the middle of the frames in the brood nest for her to begin laying. So that's kind of a clue. I like to see that. It's not always a guarantee that they've got a queen, but it's a clue that, hey, I think they're probably gonna have a queen and she's probably gonna be laying soon. Now on the bottom of this frame, check those queen cells out. Now they're hatched, so if you kind of look at these queen cells, you can see there's a huge one. They're all empty. See, they're the hole where the queen has emerged. So I know that they raised the queen, and I know that she is out. So again, the odds are looking pretty good that we're gonna have a laying queen in this hive that swarmed. So let's proceed a little bit further. And yes, I'm seeing eggs. So yeah, so they were preparing for that new queen. You can kind of see here, look at all those empty swarm cells on the bottom of that frame. It's kind of the classic swarm cells on the bottom of a frame, but they're all empty. I mean, so they've all hatched and the bees just haven't torn them down yet. But it looks like they did successfully raise a new queen, because these center frames, they don't have a lot of eggs, but you can see that she is indeed starting to lay. So I think probably in the past couple of days, really, this new queen has just begun to lay. Now it's hard to see those eggs. I mean, you gotta tilt this frame so the sunlight shines right down into those cells. And I tell folks all the time, you know, if you have a hard time finding eggs, take a bunch of pictures with your smartphone or your video. Get this frame angled so the sunlight shining right down into the cells. Take those pictures, usually about 6 inches or so from the frame. Take some videos, and then you can go inside and zoom up on those pictures or video and see those eggs if you have trouble, you know, spotting eggs. So anyway, so this hive, it's really looking good. I mean, they've rebounded really well after swarming. They've got this second box pretty much full of bees. They've got a queen who's now laying eggs. So I'm going to, off the video, I'm going to add a super to this hive. I'll put a super, I'm going to feed them for another week or so, let them get started in that super, and they'll probably never miss a beat, having swarmed and recover just fine. So the last video I showed, I was going to make that the last because I know we're running a little bit long in the videos here, but I took a quick peek into this hive, and it was just a little too exciting not to show you guys. So this was a single story hive that was 80% full of bees and drawn comb. And so we added a second brood box. We happened to add a medium for a second brood box on this hive about a week ago. Now our second medium was already drawn comb, and I just wanted to show you guys in the past week what they've done. And now this is in North Texas, in the North Texas area, but I'm seeing similar occurrences even in Southeast Texas elsewhere. They've already filled up probably the middle 5 frames with fresh nectar, and even capping off a little bit of it already. So the honey flow is definitely on. I mean, you can see the nectar down in the bottom of those frames, and that's, you know, this hive wasn't fed, and so you can see that they're already starting to bring in nectar. They're filling up the center of these frames. So, I mean, the honey flow is definitely on. I mean, you know, you can look in the hives and you can see they're adding white comb to the top bars. They're bringing in nectar. Um, yeah, so the honey flow has begun for sure. You know, a week, 10 days ago, these hives were needing to be fed because they were, you know, almost starving. But, you know, now 10 days later after some good rains, you know, and those flowers are really starting to bloom, these hives are bringing in the honey. So make sure you've got your supers ready, and don't let them get more than 80% full, and keep adding the supers. Okay, folks, so let's jump back into the PowerPoint. And you know, that's you know, it's always a lot of fun. You have to excuse my poor videographer skills out there. I think I cut out several times where the stand would fall over because of the wind. But so excuse my poor videographer skills. But one of these days, I will improve and continue to get a bit better at that. So okay, May tips. So I gave a lot of the most important May tips, you know, in that video. And so some of those things we're gonna not address in the PowerPoint portion, but some of the things we're gonna touch on in a bit more detail because they're just so important. You know, I mentioned the honey flow several times during that video, and these are some of the plants that in Texas and really in the South in general that are high nectar yielding blooms. And so on the far left, this is the scabiosa or pincushion. It's in bloom right now. Just started about a week ago. The next, of course, is the Chinese tallow tree. This is the only plant that I'm kind of seeing that's running a little bit late. You know, tallow is looking like it's that the tallow trees are 1 to 2 weeks behind normal as far as bloom periods. So it seems like the trees are blooming a little bit late. The flowers seem to be blooming on schedule. And I'm kind of blaming that on a big freeze we had in February. Next, you've got the yellow clover, white clover, sweet clover. They're all coming into bloom. And then, of course, the far right is the gaillardia or the Indian blanket. And those are all great nectar producers. They're all in bloom or coming into bloom very shortly in most of the South. So I mentioned honey flow several times, you know, just for point of reference, you know, the major honey flow in most regions in the South begins in early to mid-May. Typically, the honey flow across the entire southern United States, certainly in Texas, is completely over by the 4th of July, with possibly the only exception of if you live in the Lubbock area and you are on irrigated cotton, then you'll see you know, more of that summer honey flow. But in most regions, you know, the natural nectar flow is wrapped up by the 4th of July. You know, this year, I didn't know what to expect because of that huge freeze in February. I mean, we were wondering, would it kill all the flowers? Were the trees going to bloom? Is everything going to be crazy late? But honestly, it seems like everything is kind of on schedule with the exception of the tallow trees. And I'm not really seeing any impact from the freeze. If anything, I'd say this could shape up to be a better than average honey flow. So kind of current conditions, you know, I was worried about the last webinar. I was a little worried about the rainfall we hadn't had, but we've got some really good rains the past couple of weeks that have reduced or eliminated the drought conditions in much of the South. There's still pockets that really could use some rain, but in general, you know, we're really seeing ample moisture at the moment. And if we keep getting rains once a week or so, I'm really optimistic about our honey crop this year. The honey flow is definitely ramping up in all regions. You know, 10 days, 2 weeks ago, you know, my hives, if I wasn't feeding them, were virtually starving. They needed food desperately. This week, you know, it's like you flipped a switch in Northeast Texas and Southeast Texas, where I've currently got bees, and they're bringing in not a tremendous amount of nectar, but definitely a strong trickle of nectar. They're starting to store some. And in a lot of those regions, I think by next week, we're kind of going to be in full swing. So again, kind of depends on where exactly you're located, but you know, if you've got strong hives, and those top boxes are 80% full, it's time to get those supers on because it's coming quickly. So like I said, I don't have a crystal ball, but it's kind of looking like this could be a pretty great year for a honey crop. So I'm going to jump over really quickly, and we're going to take a super common question is, how do you tell when the primary honey flow begins? Because how are you supposed to know when it begins? And we're going to jump to Lauren Ward really quickly, who's going to answer that question for us of, how do you tell when the primary honey flow begins?
How you tell the honey flow has begun. In the spring, it's usually pretty dramatic. But for me, part of beekeeping is learning everything bee adjacent. And so if you're in Texas, you may know one of the first major flows is Yaupon. So if you're Central or East Texas, Yaupon holly is going to be one of your first major flows. And so I find myself learning more and more plants, keeping an eye on things. And so usually I know when something is close to blooming. Like this year I was watching the elm trees, as I do most years, and they bloom about the third week of January here. But if looking in your hives and outside your hives, even the way to know you're on a honey flow, you're going to have a whole lot of activity. It's going to sound like an airport because they're coming in loaded with nectar. So they're heavy bees coming into land. They may have some congestion at the entrance because there's so many foragers going out if you've got a real populous hive. When you look in that hive, you're going to probably have they're going to be doing what's called whitening comb. And what that is they're making wax. They're kind of stimulated to make wax. And so around the edges of things, there's going to be bright white new wax. That's a really good sign. And then honestly, as you're lifting through it, if they've been putting it up a little while, you'll know it's heavy. But right at the first, you may just have a whole lot of frames that have that, shine of nectar in the cells. As a flow goes on, so like a really heavy, like a tallow flow, they may even start cramming that nectar into cells you don't want them to, kind of in the brood nest. So that's another sign. So yeah, spring usually comes on, hard, heavy. And then that kind of slows down. So we've got several plants that are really heavy producers, and then little plants in the middle that are decent producers. And then summer kind of dries off, and then we get to fall, and most of the time we get decent honey in the fall. It depends. Depends on where you are. If you're in a good goldenrod area, that's great. Actually, the hill country does fairly well in the fall, to me, surprisingly well. In the fall, they may not be stimulated quite to that same extent as they are in the spring. So you might not see them whitening a lot of comb. You might not see that, but you are probably going to notice just weight-wise. So the fall is when I'm going, especially later in the fall, to go check weight. And by weight, I mean honey and nectar, because that's the heavy stuff. And so, you take that super off, and all of a sudden it weighs 20 pounds. And that's the fall flow. And it'll creep up on you. They can sometimes put up quite a bit of honey, and if not, you're feeding. So that's when I'm noticing, is when I'm checking for weight anyway, and I'm saying either the plants will do it or I will do it in the fall, but it's a little more gradual than the spring.
So there you go. That's love that answer on how to tell, when the honey flow is beginning. So next, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in your bees. And I want to ask you guys, and this is going to be helpful for all of us. I think this will be educational, but what are you observing right now with your honey flow in your area? So are you seeing, and I just launched a poll for you to take a look at, you're not seeing any evidence of a honey flow yet. So kind of based on what Lauren just described, you're not seeing any evidence, or you're seeing a trickle of nectar starting to come in, or your honey flows in full swing. And this is just kind of an interesting gauge. I mean, most of you guys are from the state of Texas, certainly most of you. And so this is kind of an interesting gauge of where we are as a state. So it looks like the vast majority, about 69% of you say you're seeing a trickle of nectar coming in. And then about 24% of you are saying your honey flow is in full swing. And then only about 7% of you are not seeing anything at all. So yes, I mean, the vast majority of you guys are, in a full swing or certainly that opening trickle of a honey flow, which is kind of exactly what I'm seeing happen right now as well. Kind of looking inside hives, I'm probably going to stop putting this slide up in the future because I mean, right now, if you look inside hives, they're full of brood. I mean, you should have, if you started with a package or made splits or you've got a nook, obviously they're only going to start with a couple of frames of brood, and then they're going to have to, they should be adding a frame or two of brood every single month as they grow. Full size, full strength hives could have anywhere from 6 to 12 plus frames of brood right now. So those hives are just really exploding this time of year, and you should see eggs, larvae, cat brood, all stages of brood. I threw this one in here really quickly, just if you are trying to care for new or growing hives. So if you've made splits, if you've got a package, a nook, a single new hive, I just want to run over really briefly some key things you don't want to miss this time of year. If you're caring for a brand new growing hive, feed 1+ gallons of 1-to-1 sugar syrup per week to aid in drawing out that new honeycomb, raising new bees. Adding essential oils to syrup is awesome if you're just trying to get them to grow. Don't feed pollen substitute. This time of year, there's no reason to feed pollen substitute. Pollen patties, dry pollen powder is just totally irrelevant because the bees are bringing in plenty of natural pollen, which is even better for them. Keep in mind when that first brood box becomes 80% full of bees, or they're starting to draw out the comb on that 7th and 8th frame, you're ready to add your second brood box. And then a final note, entrance reducers. You can use entrance reducers. Here's kind of my opinion on entrance reducers this time of year. If you have a single deep box that is half full of bees or less, then you can put your entrance reducer on the hive with the largest opening. If your hive is more than half full of bees in that single box, or if your hive's already 2 brood boxes, don't use an entrance reducer at all. They need all that space to keep that hive ventilated and cool. So maybe that'll help you a bit. But once you kind of get over a half full box of bees, there's no real reason to keep that entrance reducer on. They should be more than able to defend themselves and protect their hive from any robbers. Okay, I'm going to jump to Cameron real quick, Cameron Crane, because another really common question a lot of folks have that we're going to address is in regards to bearding. A lot of folks this time of year see a big beard of bees on the front of their hive, and it can be a little bit disconcerting if you've not seen that before, because it's like, why is there this huge beard of bees hanging on in front of my hive? Do they not like their hive? Are they going to swarm? What's going on? So let's check out what it is, and we're going to talk a bit about when it is and isn't a problem right after this.
So what causes bearding? When a hive is crowded and it needs to cool itself down, the bees will hang out on the outside of the hive. There's still bees inside the hive, and they're regulating airflow through that hive. If all the bees were inside the hive, they wouldn't be able to efficiently move air through the combs of that hive. So they hang out on the extra bees hang out on the outside. People ask, what to do about it? To me, there's not really anything to do about it. It's just an indication of the time, the season of the year. It's hot outside. We're in Texas. It gets pretty hot. And so the bees have to keep their hive cool. So the extra bees will hang out on the outside. to me, there's nothing to do about it. It's not a problem. It's just how the bees work, and they're doing their job to move air through that hive, and the bees that would get in the way to moving air are just going to hang out on the outside of the box. It's no problem.
So yeah, I mean, I agree with, Cameron, that in general, it's no big deal, when bees are bearding. I mean, it's they're doing what they're supposed to do. It's kind of hot inside and they don't want to all be inside. So a couple quick notes I want to add on to that is humidity definitely affects the level of bearding. When I see it's really high humidity, I tend to see more bees bearding out the fronts of the hives. And higher temperatures, obviously, the bees are going to be bearding more outside the front of the hive. The one kind of combining the 2 points there on space available and when to be concerned. The one thing I do notice is that generally only really strong hives are going to beard. It's an indication that it's too hot inside because there's so many bees inside. So usually I like to see bearding because I know, hey, if they're bearding, I've got a pretty good strong hive. It also tells me that they're decently full of bees. So when I see a lot of bearding, I'm always going to check my hive and make sure that top box isn't more than 80% full. If it's not, don't worry about bearding. If it is more than 80% full, well, that's when you need to add another box because they need more space. So don't worry about bearding, not a big deal. The one caution is, hey, check, make sure they don't need another box. They don't need another box, don't worry about it. So again, I've said this a million times, so I'm sorry, I apologize to keep repeating it, but when it comes to adding additional boxes, this time of year, primarily supers, top box is 80% full, time to add another one, whether that's a second brood box or a super, or a third super, or a 10th super. A common question is, when should you stop adding supers? And my answer to that is whenever the bees stop filling them with honey. In most cases, I don't usually super in the South past mid-June. Usually about mid-June, I stop supering, let them really pack full the supers they've got. But if they're really bringing it in like crazy and, they're still, filling up boxes, you could super past that. But generally by mid-June, I'm kind of not putting supers on. Another common question is, can I add 2 supers at once? And, let's say you've got a really strong hive that's full of bees, it's 2 brood boxes and they're both packed full of bees, and you don't live very close to your hives. Can you put 2 supers on at once and leave and not come back for a couple of weeks? Absolutely. If you've got a really strong hive, 2 brood boxes pretty much completely full of bees, or bottom box 100% full, second brood box is 80% full, they're going to easily be able to take care of 2 supers. Adding that extra space is no problem. So if you live nearby, it's a better idea to just add 1 at a time, let them get it 80% full, then add your second one, because it kind of forces them to fill up their boxes. With 2, they might kind of fill them up at the same time. So you may end up with 2 half full boxes if the honey flow ends, or when the honey flow ends. So, but adding 2 supers, especially if you live a long way away from your bees, is no problem. I'd rather do that than let them overfill the super and hit that 100% point. Because once they hit 100%, you're at risk of swarming. Last thing is, a common question is, what is bottom supering and should I do it? If you've read much literature, you hear folks talk about bottom supering versus top supering. It's real simple. I mean, bottom supering comes into play when you are adding your second super. And when you add, your second super, you can either put it right on top of your first super, or you can actually lift up your first super, put your new box underneath it, and then have your full super on top. And so you're putting that new super above your 2 brood nests, but underneath your 80% full super. The concept is that you're kind of forcing the bees to really work on that new super, because you're putting it right above the brood nest. And oftentimes the bees will work that second super a little bit faster. They also don't have quite as far to travel to store honey. They don't have to go up through a couple boxes. They just go right above the brood nest and they can store the honey. That being said, it's also a lot of trouble to lift off those heavy supers and bottom super. So I would say you might make 2 or 3% more honey by bottom supering. In general, bees don't have a problem moving right up. So bottom super isn't going to hurt anything. It's also not going to make a huge difference when it comes to your overall honey crop. So it's kind of optional. If you kind of want to make every drop of honey you can, then go ahead and bottom super. If not, then just continually adding supers to the top is perfectly fine. I'm going to jump to Chris more because Chris has some really good tips on encouraging bees to draw out honeycomb, because it's a huge problem for a lot of folks to say, well, that's well and good that we're adding supers, but my bees will not draw out the honeycomb. What are some ways we can encourage bees to draw out honeycomb? And Chris is a commercial beekeeper, a friend of mine, but he is really, really good at getting bees to draw out comb. And he's got some pretty cool tips on how to encourage bees to draw out that honeycomb. So let's take a look and see what Chris has to say.
Okay, how do you get bees to draw out comb? That's a good question, and of course, you need to have a good, strong colony, and it helps to have either a good, strong honey flow, or you've got to pour the feed to them. It takes 7 pounds of honey to make a pound of wax, so they need the resources to produce the wax. We cheat just a little bit. We actually put additional beeswax on the frames, and to give the bees, the bees will actually take the beeswax and they'll actually move it around. So we used to, we use a trim roller that you can get at the hardware store. It's a foam roller, and we melt wax in like a roasting pan. And then it's either a 3 or 4 inch roller, and make sure you get the foam that works best. And then we roll it on and then give it to the bees. And we used to just roll it when we had time and we were slow. But then I discovered, and this is one of those things that's not rocket science, but you do it several times, and then you discover, as soon as you roll that wax on, that wax is soft and it has a great aroma. And then you store it and you put it on the bees 2 or 3 months later, it's hard and it doesn't have the aroma. So what we do now is we roll the wax on the frames one day and we put it on the bees the next day. The wax is still soft and the wax still has an aroma, and those bees just jump all over it. And next thing you know, that frame's drawn.
So I've got nothing to add other than I completely agree with Chris on that. Adding that wax to those frames is tremendously helpful in getting them to draw it out even faster. The wax you buy should have, the frames you buy should come with wax already on the foundation, but adding additional wax, rolling that melted wax onto those frames of foundation just gets the bees to just, as Chris said, explode. They draw it out seemingly overnight, especially if you're feeding heavily. Now, the elums later on in just a few minutes, the elums are going to talk about queen excluders and how to use queen excluders, when to use queen excluders, et cetera. And I'm just going to throw this out there because we're talking about supering, and they're going to get into more details around it. But keep in mind, bees will not draw out foundation through a queen excluder. So if you put a queen excluder above your 2 brood boxes and you put a box of foundation above that queen excluder, the bees will not go through that queen excluder to draw out that fresh foundation. You've got to leave the queen excluder off, put that box of foundation on top of the hive, let the bees get started drawing it out. Keep feeding at that point. I like to feed until they've got a fist, like I mentioned in the video, a fist-sized piece of comb drawn out in the middle 3 or 4 frames. And at that point, I stop feeding and I stop feeding and put that queen excluder on. So another quick poll for you guys. And let me see if I can find it here. Well, I had another poll for you guys. Let me see if I can, I can't seem to find it. Oh, there it is. There it is. So yeah, we're going to talk just briefly about honey supers. And another common question is, should I use a deep box for a honey super? Should I use a medium box for a honey super? Should I use a shallow box for a honey super? And I was just curious, what you guys use, and now I'm not talking about for brood boxes. I'm talking about for your honey supers where your bees are storing your surplus honey. Do you typically use deep boxes and medium boxes or shallow boxes? And it looks like by far, it looks like 84% of you use medium boxes for honey supers. About 9% of you use deeps, and about another 9% of you use the shallow. So vast majority use mediums for honey supers. And I kind of agree with that, because a medium is a very efficient size, but it's not too heavy. A deep box full of honey can weigh up to 80 pounds. That is heavy. Medium box is more like 40 pounds. So it's a bit more realistic for a lot of folks to carry. But I do want to, this is the last video we're going to jump to, but I want to jump to Michael Kelling, and he does a great job of describing kind of some of the pros and cons with using, deeps versus mediums versus shallows for your honey supers.
At some point in your beekeeping career, you're going to have to decide whether you want to use deeps, mediums, or shallows for your supers. And I have to ask you, what age are you and how strong are you? I am 60 plus years old and choose not to carry a 90-pound box of honey around while there's 20,000 bees trying to convince me not to. So I don't like to use deeps for supers. If I had teenage grandsons or access to college kids who are willing to haul around that kind of box, I would probably use supers. It's less costly and expensive, less extraction effort, and you get more honey for your effort. But since I don't want to carry those around, I use either mediums or shallows. There's not a lot of difference in the two. A deep full of honey will weigh 90 pounds. A medium full of honey weighs about 60, and a shallow full of honey weighs about 45 pounds. I can still handle the 60-pound mediums, but they're a pain. The 45s are very comfortable, but I mainly have medium medium supers at this time, so I stick with my mediums. If I had a choice at this point, I would go to shallows, but you have to understand you're spending more for the same capacity on your equipment, and you're going to have to extract a few more frames to get the same amount of honey. So it depends on your situation, as all beekeeping does. Do you want to lift 90 pounds? Can you lift 60 pounds? Or are you more comfortable lifting the 45 pounds? Another option is to go to the 8-frame equipment, which is going to cut your weight down by another 20%. But the big thing is deciding what you want to do and sticking with it. It is very difficult to change horses in the middle of the stream. It's very difficult to change from 10-frame to 8-frame in the middle of your career. It's very difficult to go from all deeps to mediums unless you're going to increase your number of hives and put all those deeps into brood chambers and add more supers in the medium format. So you decide what you want to do, but look to the future, because what you do now is probably what you're going to do for the rest of your beekeeping career.
So yes, couldn't agree more. It's very important to make that decision up front for certainly with 8-frame versus 10-frame. Another common thing I want to touch on while we're talking about supering is what we call checkerboarding frames. Now, you may have heard of this. You may have tried it, and it's a concept of encouraging bees to draw out new frames of foundation by putting them in between already drawn out frames of foundation. So every other frame is going to be foundation, comb, foundation, comb, foundation, comb. And in honey supers, it's a great idea. I mean, commercially, and I did this as a hobby beekeeper. I do it now as a commercial beekeeper. I don't necessarily, if I like putting a whole box of foundation on top of a hive, because it's a lot of effort for bees to draw out an entire box of foundation. Now, if you put every other frame is comb, now the bees have half as much to draw out, and they're going to move up into that super much faster because it's already got that drawn out honeycomb in it. So checkerboarding frames in a honey super, if you already have some previously drawn out comb, is a great idea. The bees move up into it faster, they draw it out faster. Highly recommend it. I don't like doing it as much with full frames of honey. So I don't like taking a full frame of honey out of my lower box and moving it up into a honey super to try to get the bees to move up. Because what I often find is if I put a full frame of honey and I've got frames of foundation on either side of it, the bees tend to just widen out that frame of honey super wide instead of drawing out the foundation on either side of it. Now, they don't do that every time, but enough that it's annoying. So I only like to do checkerboarding in my supers with foundation and then empty frames of drawn comb, if that makes sense. Another common question I see is, okay, what about checkerboarding in brood nests? Can I put frames of foundation right in the middle of the brood nest to get them to draw it out? No, I never recommend checkerboarding in brood nests. One of the golden rules in beekeeping is you never want to separate the brood. You never want to split up the brood nest. So you should never take empty frames of comb or empty frames of foundation and put them in the brood nest in a way that it's separating the brood. Frames of brood should always stay together. And if you want to add extra frames, you add them to the outside of the brood nest. And that's because, the bees have to keep that brood warm and fed, and you start stretching out their brood nest and separating it out. On chilly nights, they're not going to be able to keep all the brood warm. And so always keep brood together, tight, compact, no checkerboarding in the brood nests. However, checkerboarding in the honey supers, go for it. Great idea. Okay, I think this is my last slide before we jump to the elams, right on schedule here. I want to go over some quick troubleshooting issues that are really, really common in the spring. These are questions I often see asked constantly on social media. My bees won't draw out a super above a queen excluder. Now, we talked about that earlier. I see people posting all the time, hey, my bees aren't drawing out my super. Why? 9 times out of 10, they've got a queen excluder on. Like we discussed, bees aren't going to draw out that honeycomb through a queen excluder unless they've already started on it. So let them get started, then add your queen excluder. Bees aren't drawing out comb in the super, and I don't have a queen excluder on. So why aren't my bees drawing out their honey supers or their second brood box for that matter? Couple things to keep in mind. One, it takes strong hives to draw out honeycomb. And so your bees may not be ready to draw out that next box. So if that bottom box is not 80% full of drawn comb and bees, or your second brood box isn't 80% full, they may or may not move up into a super to start drawing it out. They tend to fill up the boxes they're in and then move on to the next boxes. So they may just need more time. Another huge factor is feed and food. Are you feeding them, or is there a really strong nectar flow? If there is not a strong nectar flow and you're not feeding them, the bees aren't going to grow. They're not going to move. They're not going to be able to draw out beeswax and move up into those next supers. That kind of goes right along with the last one, which is, my bees aren't growing. And, if someone says, hey, my bees aren't growing, the first thing I say is, do you see, have you seen your queen bee, or do you at least see eggs and larvae? So make sure you've got a good laying queen, and make sure you've got all stages of brood. Make sure that they're being fed properly. And if all that is true, then sometimes it just takes patience. Bees are kind of like kids or pets, and that hives can all grow at different rates. And we talk about this a lot in the summer webinars, but that's why as beekeepers, we're often equalizing brood. We're taking a frame of brood from a really strong hive, shaking the bees off of it, and putting it right in the center of a weaker hive to boost their population. And because all hives tend to be different strengths, grow at different rates, they're kind of their own animal, their own organism. And so helping them by equalizing that brood between hives is a great way to keep everything balanced. One quick note I want to throw out there, as far as I forgot to mention on bees that aren't drawing out comb in your honey super. Kind of like Chris mentioned in our video, you know, it needs to be fresh beeswax on those frames. If you've got frames of foundation that have been sitting in your garage for 2 or 3 months, the bees aren't going to draw those out well, certainly, because once you get a fine coating of dust on those frames, the bees just, they don't even recognize it as honeycomb. They just say there's, you know, sheets of plastic up there. What are we supposed to do with that? You know, having that fresh beeswax that you can really smell on those frames is what draws the bees up and encourages them to start drawing out those frames. So make sure it's recently purchased. You know, the idea is you buy the frames and put them directly on the hive within a week or so. Or, you know, if you do need to store frames of foundation, make sure they're wrapped up in a trash bag so that they can't get dust on them, and that'll preserve them. But if they have been sitting out exposed for, you know, more than a couple of weeks, then you need to recoat them with beeswax, kind of like Chris mentioned in the video. Oh, I lied. It wasn't my last slide. Okay, this is the last slide. We're not going to talk about this much because there's not a lot to do with Varroa mites in May, but I did want to throw out there that the treatment window is now closed for most treatments if you want to harvest honey. So now that the honey flow is gearing up, you do not want to treat your hives for mites if you also want to make a crop. Now, if your mites are, usually I say, if your mites are 2 per 100 bees or more in your Varroa mite test, you need to treat. Well, this time of year, I do let those numbers start creeping up a little bit. So if I'm seeing 3, maybe 4 mites per 100 bees, but my hive is healthy and vibrant, I'll often wait to treat until right after I harvest my honey in late June or early July. If they're over 3 or 4 mites, you know, if you're getting 5, 6, 7 mites in your Varroa mite tests, then you can try using a treatment that you can use while honey supers are on. And there's a number of those that you can use. They're not as effective, but they should hopefully knock down those numbers enough to kind of get you to the end of the honey flow when you can treat a little bit more. If that's not working, or if you have even a really severe infestation, you know, above 7 or 8 per 100 bees, you may need to give up on making a honey crop and use a treatment that really works to knock those mites back. For treatment options, go to the Google Honeybee Health Coalition Varroa, and they've got an awesome diagnostic tool to help guide you through what treatments work, what time of year, and with honey supers, etc. So, okay, James and Sherry are going to talk about queen excluders. I'm going to jump over and talk about and answer any questions that you have. So keep putting questions in the Q&A box, and I'm going to jump over and start answering those. James and Sherry will talk about queen excluders and how to use them, how not to use them, and then I'll jump back in at the end with some final comments.
Hi.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Blake. We really enjoyed that. We answered a lot of questions. So,
Man, we did.
so just take right over.
My goodness. I think we cleaned it out for you, so you're welcome. Great questions every time. Y'all come up with the best questions.
They are really good questions.
They are.
In regards to queen excluders, which is our topic, obviously we're live. So as opposed to being a recorded version, we're here in person. We have a good friend named Dodie Stillman, and she calls a queen excluder a tool, a beekeeping tool, much like many of the others, our hive tools or our frame grips. And that's truly what they are. And as with all tools, we have an option to either use them or not use them. And I think that's a great way to look at queen excluders, because queen excluders can be a controversial topic, and they shouldn't be. It's just one of those things. You decide, do you want to do it or do you not? And that's what we want to talk about tonight. Well,
and like I've got on the slide, the theory is that we keep the brood nest, and the honey super, the honey super. We don't, you see that little queen on that picture there? She's really large, isn't she? The theory is she can't get through that. That may be an over exaggeration.
That's a TBS queen.
It is a TBS queen.
Big
She's
girl.
huge. But we really you know, there's caveats about it. So that's what our goal is tonight, is to kind of to walk you through that.
You know, I think it's interesting that experienced beekeepers already know their opinions on queen excluders,
They do.
and typically it's the new beekeeper that has the question mark as to what to do with it. And the reason I say that's interesting is that usually new beekeepers during their first year don't have the opportunity to use a queen excluder because they're still growing their colonies. They either started with a package or with nucleus colonies,
That's a good point.
nukes or nooks. And so it really doesn't come into play. So as a new beekeeper, if you don't reach that 80% mark that Blake was talking about prior to or during the nectar flow, the primary nectar flow, then that queen excluder that you may have purchased maybe just needs to stay with your honey supers, which you're going to use next year.
Next year.
Just store them, keep
That's
them
right.
clean.
And it'll happen. It'll happen. Well, there's pros and cons for using really any product that we've got other than the boxes itself. So let's kind of go over some of those pros and cons. Starting with the pros. It protects the honey storage area. It keeps the queen from moving up. So when we are extracting those honey supers, taking them off the box to take them back to the house or wherever to extract them, we don't have to search for that queen.
And that's kind of a big deal when you're pulling frames and you're extracting, which can be kind of a tedious job anyway. If you're seeing that you've got the possibility of a queen being there, that would be that maybe we have a little bit of brood, maybe we have some pollen. Those are indications that, wow, we really do need to watch for our queen.
Yeah.
So it's nice when you have that opportunity to exclude that queen.
That's right.
You know, nothing's 100%, but odds are she's not up top.
That's right. No brood in those honey frames. And I can say from experience, years ago, somebody forgot to put a queen excluder on one year and one colony or two or four, that we had a few of those center frames that had brood on them. And I don't really consider that protein in the honey, but we really and truly lost multiple frames of honey because there were brood. She had gotten up in there and done a little laying, and it was frustrating at the time, but that is a pro, that you don't have to worry about the queen getting up in there and laying in your.
And that's true.
nice
And I mentioned pollen a minute ago. We can almost guarantee you that if you've got frames stored and you have pollen in those stored frames from an extraction that you're wanting to overfollow, overwinter, whatever the words may be, if you're going to get wax moths or pests within those stored frames, it's going to be as a result of having pollen stored there.
It is.
So being able to X that off and say it's not there is a big deal. It does help.
Because they don't put pollen where there's not going to be brood. It's kind of funny how that works. But those are pros. That would be a reason why we would use a queen excluder.
And those are all really good reasons.
Cons, reason we wouldn't use a queen excluder, or we might consider not using a queen excluder. Workers' storage progresses slower if they've got to go through a queen excluder. And I think that's probably the number one argument with beekeepers that are very set about not using it. And I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm gonna say the people I've talked to, 50-50. Some use them and some don't. We do. But it's because of that. They think that it slows the progress down. And I think it probably does to a degree. But whether or not that's an amount of time that we can't, is it a day or is it an hour?
You know,
so
it'd be interesting to see what that time frame is from the time a forager bee enters the entrance on a lower box and goes through box 1 up to box 2. Where does that nectar get passed off? Do they go all the way up to the honey super?
Right.
Those are questions I don't know because we've never seen it, but it has to slow the process down somewhat.
A little bit. But is it enough that you want to not use one?
I don't know. You know, there are other options as well.
That's right. So tendency to deposit more nectar in the brood nest as opposed to the super, because like James just said, I'm going to dump it here. I don't want to go there.
I would never say that bees are lazy, but I know for a fact that bees are opportunistic. So if they find that there's a reason to do something different than what we as humans want them to do, I promise they'll take advantage of it.
They did not read the same books that we did. And that in that statement, makes the swarm potential, because backfilling of a brood nest, depositing honey in that brood nest where she doesn't have room to lay, she being a queen, is a swarm potential that opens you up for swarm problems. So we don't want that to happen. So if that's one of the repercussions, you'd have to manage it.
That
more.
third item, possibly lower honey production, that would be the reason that most beekeepers give for not wanting to use a queen excluder. There's a lot written about that.
Mhm.
There's probably more written as to how that's a fallacy rather than a truth, but it's not up to us to decide for you. But that is a potential con for it.
It kind of relates to the first bullet point there. It may slow them down. And is it an amount that's measurable? I don't know. We don't have a way of measuring that. I'm sure there's bound to be a study out there somewhere, but I've not found it. So that's pros and cons. Now let's talk about points to consider, because it's not just whether or not, this is good about it, this is bad about it, but there are aspects that we ought to consider before we make that decision. Small queens might be able to get through it, and some of them are small queens.
And why would we have a small queen during a nectar flow? Well, maybe we had to install a new queen. Maybe our queen had to be replaced for whatever the reason, or the colony replaced her as a supersedure. That's a possibility. She could get through there. So maybe you have to think about it.
And some genetics are smaller queens. Years past, there was a one that was floating around that was tiny, and I would have thought that she would have been able to get through a queen excluder. So it wouldn't exclude her then. Bees not working supers usually means a flow isn't strong enough and little to do with the excluder. I love that. That's
the one that we go with when, especially again, new beekeepers want to get that honey super on so we can get that first taste of our own honey, which is the best honey in the world.
It is.
But quite often we get carried away and we do it too quickly, either because our colony may not be strong enough or that the nectar flow may not be strong enough.
Yeah.
So it's not really the excluder.
Probably just that the area has, and we talked to a couple of people with questions up in West Lubbock that things aren't happening up there. And, queen excluder is not what's slowing them down. It's that the nectar flow hasn't started. So it may not be the excluder. Upper entrances. This is an option. And I talked to a couple of people about that as well on questions and answers. Upper entrances are options for you as you build your supers and they get higher and higher. And we'd love to think that we'd get 10 high. Odds are we're 2 or 3 high. But an upper entrance could speed up that process and take away a couple of those bullet points out of the cons category. So if you're worried about it slowing those bees down, upper entrances could be your answer.
We at TBS have an upper entrance built into an inner cover, which is basically an emery shim. If you're not familiar with emery shims, I encourage you to look it up because they can be utilized to add an upper entrance on top of your first super before you add a second one and between your third and fourth. So that's giving you the upper entrance. It's giving you some more ventilation, and that way you do not have to drill a hole in your box.
And that's true. I want to tell them what that is real quick. So it's your inner cover. It's got a little notch cut in it. And if you use telescopic lids, it doesn't work with a migratory lid, but if you use telescopic lids, I can't say that word tonight.
Telescopic lids.
Thank you. Push it forward and it leaves that little notch open where the bees can travel. Turn the notch down and the bees can travel up in and out of it, and they will.
It's a pretty neat little item.
Yeah,
top supering, Blake talked about that. If you throw a new box on top of a
fully drawn,
right, you can encounter some difficulties, and top supering is a good way to just push right through it.
Well, it is, and it also stops the queen from laying. If you want to not do a queen excluder, top super, leave the full super on the bottom, and it kind of creates a barrier, but the queen's not going to travel above a whole box of fully capped honey in order to get to an uncapped super on top to lay. She's not going to do that. It creates a honey barrier.
Yeah, and that's true most of the time. And that honey band, which is again another interesting concept to research. And that honey band holds true in lots of different areas of our colonies, but especially on supering. Look
Yeah.
that up. You'll
It
enjoy
is
that.
interesting. When drawing new foundation, Blake, you talked about this. When drawing new foundation, wait to add the excluder until you have a fist size area of wax being drawn. And that's really important because Blake is exactly right. You're not going to get comb drawn out with a queen excluder there. They're going to just kind of want to avoid it. They're going to start packing it away somewhere else. So really wait until you've got some comb started on those frames, then add the the queen excluder.
And then that becomes our mark to stop feeding once that queen excluder goes on.
That's right. Other uses, and I found this picture. I was looking for a picture of using a queen excluder as an entrance. And this one I made me chuckle because it's the queen going, I want back in. I want back in, not out. I want back in. So it made me laugh. But shakedown method to find a queen. One of Blake's videos, it's a great video and been viewed hundreds and hundreds of times, is when you can't find a queen, you have to really dig. And so there's a method called shakedown to get all the bees out, and then you use a queen excluder to trap her, to locate her, and it works very, very well. That's another good use of a queen excluder. If you purchase some and you decide not to use it for supers, it's another good way to use it.
They're also commonly used once, like the last item shows, if we've captured a swarm or if we've installed a package. If you're concerned about losing the queen, you can put a queen excluder on top of your bottom board. Right. That's another opportunity to use it. So the queen excluder does have many uses.
It does.
In addition to just protecting the honey from the queen.
It does. And don't forget to remove it after a few days.
Would that be awful to try?
Well, maybe that's why that queen right there, she's like, oh, in, let me in. Yeah, you forgot to take it off.
If in the scenario that we put it on the bottom board and the drones can't get out,
no,
your worker bees can,
right.
But if you have drones in your colony, they can't get
drone
out.
Trapper too.
You can certainly stop at the entrance to your colony and cause a real overheating problem.
That's right. All right, so I have a video. Blake had all his videos, but Blake is smarter than me. I'm gonna just put that out there. When it comes to take, I will. Thanks. He probably appreciates that too. So I'm gonna attempt to play this video. He does it in a better fashion where it's on his desktop, but in the lieu of time, we're going to just see if I can play it here. It's about 4 minutes, and it's Blake telling us when and how to add that queen excluder.
Hey guys, Blake here with Texas Bee Supply. So we want to show you guys how to add a queen excluder, really when to add a queen excluder on a hive that you've added a super to. So this particular hive, we added a super of foundation to it about a week or so ago. We gave them a half a gallon of syrup to get them started drawing out that foundation. And now we're going to check it out today and see if they're ready to add a queen excluder. So let's take a look. So right off the bat, we can see there's some great bee activity up here. And every hive is a little different in the speed at which it starts drawing out foundation. Some do it incredibly quickly, some do it very slowly. So what we're looking for is just to see that they've gotten started drawing out this foundation so we can add that queen excluder. So you can see here they've just started drawing out that foundation. And on this side they've drawn out really about half of that frame of foundation. And what I'm really wanting to see is I'm wanting to see in the middle 3 or 4 frames that they've just gotten started. So again, here they've drawn out almost the whole frame. And again, on this side, they've already got some nectar stored. So this hive is a bit of an overachiever. Really, we should have had this queen excluder on a couple days ago because they've already drawn out most of the center frames in this hive. Really, once they've got about a fist-sized piece of comb drawn out on the middle 3 to 4 frames, that's when I like to go ahead and add that queen excluder. You see they're just getting started on this one over here. And that queen excluder really just prevents that queen from coming up into the second box and laying eggs. So they're ready for their queen excluder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them some smoke to get those bees to start running down into the hive. We don't want to trap the queen up here when we add that queen excluder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently shake off the bees out of my honey super so that just in case the queen is up here, I've got her down in the bottom box. One thing you can also do is you can use your bee brush to brush the bees off. Another tip would be, after you smoke the bees, let the hive sit for a couple of minutes. I didn't do that, but if you let the hive sit for a couple of minutes after you kind of smoke them hard up in this super, then it'll get that queen to really start running down. Okay, so I've got the bees, for the most part, shook out of this super. I'm pretty confident our queen is not up here at this point. Typically, as soon as you open that lid and give that hive some smoke, that queen is going to start running down immediately. So the odds that she even stays up here at all are pretty slim. She typically starts running down, like I said, really quickly. Okay, so I've got the bees down. I'm going to pry these boxes apart. Add my queen excluder. I'm just going to put that box right back up on top. Now, because the bees have already drawn out so much comb in this second box, I'm not going to do any more feeding. I'm going to stop all feeding. But if they had only drawn out about a fist-sized piece on the middle 3 or 4 frames, then I would go ahead and give them maybe a 1/4 gallon of syrup just to keep them moving up to that queen excluder, and then I would stop all feeding. So that's it. Feel free to check out our website, texasbeesupply.com, where we've got a lot more great videos. Thanks.
Okay. That was great. I hope it played well. I think that it did. So if it did, then yay.
Yeah.
James had a good idea that we ought to just briefly tell you there's a few kinds of queen excluders that we offer that are on the market. The metal one, like Blake used in that video, plastic one, and then a wood bound metal one. So it's just like that metal one, but it has a wood framework around it, which I really like because I'm not a big proponent of the metal ones.
Yeah, well, I like the metal one because that's what's inside the wood bound. But by itself, sometimes it's not as.
Leaves little cracks on the edges.
It does a little bit, but I think for hobby beekeepers or someone that doesn't require a lot of them, the wood bound is really a great way to go.
It is.
It makes a nice clean seal, just like a box to a box.
It does.
And I like it a lot.
It does. So that's the kinds of queen excluders. All right, let me get my slide to. There we go. The bottom line. We got to have a bottom line. Last slide for us. It's up to you. It's up to you. It's not going to make or break it either way when you've got a good nectar flow going. And we almost showed a video by Tara Chapman, but we were pushing it with just the one. But she quoted something, and it's in the magazine this month, that it's regardless, Tara Chapman with 2 hives honey, it'll be okay.
It will be okay, regardless of what your decision is. Learn how to work with that decision. Take the information we've provided, and if you want to use a queen excluder, there are ways to make it work. If you want to do without it, there are ways to make that work. It's all good and fun, and a queen excluder is a tool.
That's right. It is. Back to you, Blake.
Okay, yeah, you guys are gonna have to jump back to the questions. So, okay, folks, thank you, James and Sherry. We're getting good on timing here these days. I mean, we are just gonna end this right on time. Couple quick notes before we wrap it up. If you have questions, reach out to help@texasbeesupply.com. The last couple of weeks, we've gotten a little behind on there just because of the volume of questions, but don't hesitate to send them in, and we are working through that list as quickly as we can. You're going to get a follow-up email to this webinar that's going to have a link to the recording, links to everything we talked about, and links to that monthly Texas Bee Supply magazine that we talked about. Next is June. In June, we're going to talk about the honey flow wrapping up, final supering, and we're going to start talking about getting the bees ready to harvest honey from, harvesting honey. All things honey is what we'll talk about in June. So until then, if you have any more questions, feel free to keep putting them in the Q&A box. We'll hang out and answer those as long as you put them in the chat box. Otherwise, we'll see all of you in June.